curious about what Huberman and Galpin shared in their nearly 5-hour-long conversation? Well, I've taken all the notes for you. In this video, I will break down the difference between strength, power, and hypertrophy, and I will share the key concepts Galpin mentioned how to get results in your training. First of all, why does this matter? This is important for all ages. If you're in your teens or 20s, you have the greatest potential to get to the peak of your bone mineral density. This is a critical time for you to do a strength training and build up your reserve. And if you're in your 30s and 40s and beyond, you need to know there are 3 things we lose with age: muscle mass, strength, and power. In a minute, I will explain their differences. After the age of 40, you lose about 1% of muscle mass per year, and you lose strength at nearly double the rate, 2% to 4% per year. Muscle power declines at a faster rate, nearly 8% per year. Muscle power is critical for everyday functions, like standing up, catching yourself from a fall, and moving confidently. Strength training is also essential to maintain your independence and mobility as you age. 2 important things you need to know. First, these declines in strength and power aren't an inevitable part of aging. They result from a lack of training. By continuing resistance exercises and staying active throughout your life, you can maintain muscle quality and keep your brain young and healthy. Second, no other form of exercise can match the benefits of heavy strength training. Resistance exercise is the most effective tool to combat neuromuscular aging. What's the difference between strength, hypertrophy, and power training? Hypertrophy means increasing muscle size. Strength training works on your ability to lift heavier weights by increasing the force your muscles can produce. And power is speed multiplied by force, which means how fast you are when lifting. For those new to training or at an intermediate level, which most people are in this category, there's a significant overlap between strength and hypertrophy gains. However, as you progress, these goals start to disentangle. For example, power lifters train for their max strength, which is called 1 rep max, and they're generally stronger than bodybuilders who focus on maximizing muscle size and hypertrophy. A common misconception is that you have to get bigger to get stronger, or that you can't gain strength without adding muscle. Neither is true. You can get stronger without increasing muscle size. And if you choose to add muscle, you will likely gain some strength as well. On the flip side, hypertrophy or muscle growth doesn't always lead to significant strength gains. Sometimes hypertrophy results from increased fluid retention within the muscle cell, which is called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. This is not bloating, it's just simply holding more hydration in the cell, which increases muscle size without necessarily improving functional strength. Strength training leads to improvements such as faster nerve signals, better synchronization of muscle fibers, and more efficient calcium recycling, all of which enhances the muscle's ability to contract forcefully and quickly. These adaptations explain how you can get stronger without necessarily getting bigger, because the muscle fibers themselves become more efficient at producing force. But at a certain point, adding muscle mass becomes necessary to continue increasing strength. We often hear things like "don't bounce at the bottom or else you're cheating," or "slow down during exercises like a lat pull down." These ideas actually come from bodybuilding principles, and they're focused on maximizing muscle growth. These are good practices for hypertrophy, but they are not necessarily the best approach for building strength. The key difference is that strength is about generating more force and lifting heavier, while hypertrophy means increasing muscle size, and power means moving heavier weights at a faster rate. So to get stronger, you need to lift heavier. And to get more powerful, you need to practice lifting heavier and faster. This doesn't mean you will never slow down in strength or power training. We always want to be in control, even when we are moving fast. But this shows that most of the do's and don'ts you have heard in the gym is about hypertrophy and not necessarily strength or power. So now that you know the difference between power, strength, and hypertrophy, I've created 2 separate videos on the same talk of Galpin and Huberman. One of them focuses on the protocol for strength and power, and the other one focuses on protocols for hypertrophy. So if you're interested, go ahead and watch those. Hitting gym versus going for a long run. Galpin talks about the studies done on people who did only endurance training, like long distance runners, versus who did only resistance training. And he concludes that resistance training and endurance training are both needed for the body for different reasons, and one cannot do the job for the other. Resistance training focuses on building muscle and improving strength. Endurance training focuses on enhancing energy efficiency. Endurance training activates a different pathway than strength training, as you can see in this diagram. That's why if you rely only on one of them, you miss on the other side. And also, there is an interference effect of endurance training on hypertrophy, as you see in this diagram. So how can we minimize the interference effect? How can we do both endurance and hypertrophy training without one of them negatively impacting the other? This is about periodization, and this is something we will soon touch on. Now, eating protein versus strength and hypertrophy training. Eating protein on its own, even without exercise, promotes muscle growth. Strength training makes this even more effective by increasing how much protein your muscles can use. These two, eating protein and strength training, work separately, but together, they boost muscle growth even more when they're done together. However, cardio workouts doesn't increase protein synthesis in the same way. Protein and supplements. You need about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight or 2.2 grams per kilogram. This is far above 0.8 grams per kilogram, which is minimum, and Galpin says hitting this high protein target reduces the need to worry about protein quality, type, or timing. If your protein intake is lower, then those factors become more critical. When it comes to carbohydrate intake, timing is more important. For strength training, a 1-to-1 ratio like 35 grams of protein and 35 grams of carbs is recommended. For intense conditioning, a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio in favor of carbs might be better. Key concepts in training. There are countless methods for strength and hypertrophy training, but the ones that are successful have these key principles in common. The most important of them is consistency. The literature clearly shows that adherence to a training program is the top predictor of success. No matter how well designed the program is, it won't yield results if you don't stick to it. 2. Overload. You must have some form of progressive overload in your program. The body is an adaptation machine. It naturally seeks to maintain homeostasis, a state of balance. Without progressively increasing the demand on your body, your progress will plateau. You can increase the overload through increasing intensity or volume or even shortening the rest times. Volume is the total amount of work you do. It is repetitions multiplied by the sets. Intensity is how hard you are working, the amount of weight you are lifting, or the speed of your movement. So for example, if increasing the weight causes your technique to break down, see if you can add 1 more rep with a good technique to create the overload compared to the previous week. The third concept, individualization. This is tailoring your program to your personal needs and goals. As we discussed in the assessment video, a summary I have made on what Galpin suggested on how to assess yourself, you need to focus on the areas you didn't pass in the test and improve on them. 4. Finding the balance. It's important to choose the right targets and balance specificity with variations in your training. Specificity means focusing on exercises that directly target your goals, like working on your bicep to grow your biceps. However, too much specificity can lead to overuse injuries, while too much variation can dilute the effectiveness of your training, because it's not providing enough consistent stimulus to specific muscles or movement pattern. The key is to find a balance that promotes progress while minimizing the risk of injury. Number 5, execution matters. The exercises you choose do not determine your adaptations. How you execute them matters. For example, simply performing deadlifts won't necessarily increase your strength unless you're executing them with proper technique and intensity. Or performing a box jump won't improve your power unless you execute them explosively. Now moving on to periodization, or how we divide our training. There are two main ways, linear and undulating. Linear focuses on one goal at a time, like a strength or hypertrophy or endurance, over 6 to 8 weeks. You stick to just one type of training, which can lead to more significant gains in that specific area, but you might lose progress in the other areas you are not working on. On the other hand, undulating periodization mixes things up by training different goals throughout the week. For example, you might do power on Monday, strength on Wednesday, and hypertrophy on Friday. Or you could include a bit of each in every workout. Both methods are equally effective, but they cater to different goals. If you want to focus intensely on one area, linear approach is better. But if you need a mix of strength, power, and hypertrophy, undulating might be the way to go for you. The key is to plan your training in blocks of 6 to 12 weeks and know exactly what you're aiming for rather than just going day by day without a clear direction. The conjugate method used by some of the stronger powerlifters is this: maintaining a consistent weekly training structure while making small variations in exercises. For example, if Wednesday is bench press day, they always bench on Wednesdays. But they might change the grip, or use a different type of barbell, or adjust the range of motion from week to week. These small changes provide just enough variation to avoid overuse injuries, while still maintaining the specificity they need to get stronger. This method allows them to train heavily, consistently, without needing complex periodization plans. However, a common mistake people make is changing exercises too frequently. Ideally, you should stick with the same exercises for at least 6 weeks, maybe even up to 10 to 12 weeks before making any changes. This consistency allows you to learn the exercise, figure out the proper loading, and begin to see progress. If you change exercises too often, you won't have enough time to get into the groove of the movement, which makes it difficult to progressively overload and see real gains. The key is to allow yourself time to progress and then introduce variations to keep advancing without hitting a plateau. The Valsalva technique. Before getting into what Galpin said about that, it's interesting to know that Peter Attia, in his book Outlive, mentioned this as one of his regrets. He said he wished he knew how to breathe properly before starting weight training. When you're lifting heavy, the Valsalva technique is all about creating intra-abdominal pressure to stabilize your spine. To do this, you take a deep breath into your abdomen, not your chest, and hold it to create a solid, pressurized cylinder around your spine. This pressure comes from both the air inside pushing outward and your muscles contracting around it. This is like filling the torso with air to act as a brace, much like a can of soda resisting being crushed when it is full. You want to breathe in and brace before the eccentric part of the lift, like when you're lowering the bar in a squat. Hold the breath throughout the lift to maintain stability. As you reach the concentric phase, or the hardest part of the lift, you can start to exhale, but only if the weight is not extremely heavy. The key is to keep the pressure without overcompressing your muscles, so you can still breathe and even talk if needed. Always make sure to breathe in when you're in a safe position, like at the top of a squat, to avoid issues like passing out from high blood pressure during an exercise. Moving on to sets and reps and what weights to choose. Volume is the main driver of hypertrophy, while intensity is the main driver of speed, power, and strength. For hypertrophy, maintaining volume is crucial, which is calculated by multiplying repetitions by sets. We aim for 10 working sets per week per muscle group for optimal growth. Strength training is typically done by 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 repetitions using heavy weights, usually over 70% of your 1 rep max, focusing on complex multi-joint movements, like squats. Power training, on the other hand, is done with moderate loads, generally between 30 to 70% of your 1 rep max. I've covered these topics in more detail in separate videos, one on hypertrophy and the other on strength and power. We'll go over exercise selection, choosing the right weights, sets, and reps, and how you can achieve these goals. If you like my summary videos, give this a thumbs up and follow along.